Ladies and gentlemen, a very, very warm welcome, a particularly warm welcome from a delightfully sunny England from a change. My name is Mark Drax. I sit on the board of SASH, and I actually sit on the board of SASH with our guest today. I'd love to introduce Steve Devlin. Steve, a warm welcome to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. And greetings.
Thank you. Well, greetings to you across the pond from my little island. I sit on the board of SASH with you, Steve. How long have you been with SASH now?
Oh, Lord. I have been a member since 12 or 13, where I presented at the conference, and I've been on the board for 4 years, I think.
Amazing. I think haven't been with a member of SASH for quite as long as you, but I think I've been on the board at an almost similar time. It's been such fun working with you.
Thank you.
Well, today what we're doing is you and I are having a conversation from the couch, so very relaxed. And I've got another screen on my left here with a bunch of topics that we're going to chat about. And our subject matter, for anyone that is interested in understanding what we're talking about sex addiction to recovery. So the journey from active sex addiction to recovery, to what you and I, Steve, believe is recovery. And we're even going to talk about that, the very definition of recovery. In fact, you know what? That is how I'm going to kick this off. I'm going to say to you, Steve, what does recovery mean to you? And even more specific, what does the word mean to you?
Let me start with the word. It's a great question. I look at it as a verb, not as a noun. It's recovering. I'm recovering my life. I'm recovering my soul. I'm recovering my spirit. I'm recovering my psyche that had been lost to addiction. It doesn't mean I'm going back to what I was before. Rather, I'm going forward, but I'm getting back those pieces that recovery had stolen from me. Addiction had stolen from me for so many years. So I'm a recovering person. I'm recovering myself. And that's how I define recovering. And it's a never-ending process. It's a journey that astonishes me every day, that I feel something new, I see something new, I experience something new that I would never have seen or experienced or felt in addiction.
Absolutely beautiful. I love your take on recovery. When I work with people I help, I sometimes, with a new client, I will say to them, so tell me, what to you does the word recovery actually mean? And because I've asked it so many times, one of the most prominent dictionary definitions of the actual word recovery means to find something that has been lost or stolen. Mm-hmm. And when I share that with a client, when I think about it for my own recovery, I say to myself, yeah, I was very lost. A massive part of me, the person I know I am today, the person I believe I want to be, I believe I am, I have a right to be today, out from under the umbrella of everything I felt so scared of that made me act in a way to please other people for so long. I finally have recovered, as you say, recovered myself. So recovery to me is about recovering me.
Yes,
that's what it means to me. I love that, and the whole concept of it being a journey. I love it. I think.
If I was to create a songbook for recovery and a songbook for 12 steps, there's many things I would put in it. But I think the top song would be Amazing Grace.
Oh, beautiful. Why is that?
I once was lost, but now I'm found. I once was blind, but now I see.
Fantastic. Absolutely beautiful.
I was lost.
Uh-huh. Steve, I think I don't dwell today too much on the number of years I was lost, but I can tell you I'm 54 today, and I would say the better part of half a century has been spent lost, which doesn't today depress me like it used to, because today I live in the joy of having found myself and feeling that I have a right to live as the authentic person I love to be, not as a puppet that I'm playing a role that I played for a very large part of my life, a role that I played to make my parents feel comfortable. And that is something that I think a lot of people, I certainly see in my clients, a lot of men come to me, and they are playing a role. They're still playing a role to please their wives, sometimes even their children. But
Right.
the people they're really still trying to play a role for is their parents, and they may be dead.
Yeah, it's interesting. It always struck me when I was a child or maybe a teenager, that you would see one person at work and another person at home. And it seemed like there was two different personalities. And that always bothered me. Of course, that is unfortunately what I became. I would become the addict over here and trying to be the good father, parent, son, friend over there. Eventually that collapsed. Now for me, recovery is all about wholeness. That, what you see of me when I'm working with a client or I'm working or volunteering is the same person you will see when I am with my family or with my friends. There's a wholeness to me that the values that I have over here are the same values that I have over here. I cannot live this divided, bifurcated life anymore. I am a whole person now because of recovery. Addiction divided me into many pieces. This brings me back together again, which brings me to tears at times. There's the gratitude that I have for the opportunity to be whole again. I'm overwhelmed at times by my new life. And when I see it in the men that I work with, particularly men, only men, but I see in the men that I work with that suddenly they get it and they're a better person, a better whatever their role is. Overall, it's just remarkable to see. It's a blessing.
Steve, I've had the privilege of knowing you for years now, and so I know what you're saying is true, because I have come to benefit from your wisdom and your kindness. I've even stayed in your home at a time which wasn't too good for me.
Yeah.
And so I know you to be that whole, stable person wherever you go. And I so relate to that. Today, I absolutely believe I bring to my people I help, to my workshops, and to my friends, and to myself, the same person. There's a wonderful documentary called The Mask You Live In, and I strongly recommend it to people out there. It's very easy to find in your country, in particular on Amazon or on Apple, or usual sources. The Mask You Live In, and it really shows how, exactly as you say, so many people, they put on a mask in the morning and they go to work. And the mask is what they want people to see. And they hide behind the mask what they don't want people to see. Yeah. The fact that they're actually pretty angry or scared or frightened or sad. And they put on this persona just to make sure that people see them in the light in which they want to be seen. Right. So I would far rather have an authentic person every day. It's also
one of the lies that addiction tells us. I'm divided in my own mind, and some people define addiction as a person, as a thing, as a disease. For me, addiction was a great lie that I was told, and I believed, and I told myself. And one of those is that I could do this over here and do this over there, and eventually they seep into one another. The addiction seeps into, your regular life. I'm working with a man now who's, I listen for the language people use. I use that same language. Oh, I only act out when, or I am only doing this at certain hours. Or when I'm alone in the house is the only time. As soon as I hear only or I hear just, I know that is a line that people are going to jump over really quickly. It's not only. Addiction for me infiltrates all areas, just like recovery. We talk about the recovery, and we can talk about the 12 steps later on. The 12th step is bringing recovery and sobriety to all areas of our life. It's not just, one area. It's not just, I'll be sober at work, I won't be sober at home. I'll be sober at home, I won't be sober at work. Recovery affects all areas, just like addiction affects all areas. And if you think it doesn't, you're lying to yourself.
Beautiful, Steve. 100%. I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Tell us how you came into recovery.
Sure. I'm very comfortable with my story. My story involves legal consequences. I was arrested in 2007 as part of a police operation. And I had been acting out when I was really honest with myself in recovery. I had been acting out for 35 years before that. And it wasn't just the last act that got me into trouble. My addiction had progressed from the time I was 15 till, I was 50, and had gotten worse and worse and worse. Again, with all these lies I had told myself. And then finally, it was that last act that got me arrested. Some people have a hard time accepting the idea that being arrested is a blessing. That they'll think, oh, arrested, that's at least I hear, at least I didn't get arrested. Okay, good for you. I did. And I had to spend time in jail because of that arrest. And I needed that. I had tried so many times to stop what I was doing. And I would have some longer periods of success, maybe a year, maybe 6 months. I would have shorter periods of success, 2 hours, 3 hours, a day, but I always returned to it. And every time I returned to it, it came back worse than when I had left it. And so the night I was arrested, and I know to the minute, to the hour, when that happened, I needed that. I needed to suddenly come face to face with what had happened to my life, because there was no other way I was going to stop. And I had to hit that wall. So they'll call it a hard bottom, as opposed to people get a soft bottom. They kind of, I'm going to change. I really need to change. For me, there was no choice. I had to stop what I was doing. I saw it as life and death. If I had continued, you and I would not be having this conversation today. I'd be 6 feet under somewhere. Today, I have changed, and it's facing my demons, which were very difficult. Having to go through withdrawal was horrific. And there's a lot of debate about whether sexual addiction and pornography addiction are real addictions. I can tell you, for me, the withdrawal period was as horrific as I believe people who face drug and alcohol withdrawal. There was a physical pain and agony that I went through when my drug of choice was no longer available to me, and my demons would just roll over me. I call them the horsemen of my apocalypse. That the regret, the shame, the fear, the anxiety, the anger, the self-loathing, just running right over top of me. And I had no way to stop them. But it was turning around and facing those and getting some assistance and getting some help through a lot of methods that got me into recovery. People who were giving of their time, who had been there before, people who had reached out to me, who I listened to and I turned to, they brought me in very gently and very kindly. There was a point about 3 months into my withdrawal that I considered taking my own life. That I thought, I cannot do this anymore. This pain is just horrific. I would have moments that I would scream in agony with no sound coming out of my mouth. Just a silent, agonizing scream. There was just my mouth open in pain, something you would see in a movie. And I considered taking my own life at that point. And I ended up writing out my own obituary, my own eulogy. What changed was when I got to the end of my own a bit, because I figured no one's going to write it. I'll write it myself. I thought that little of myself at that point. And the words, and yet, and then came to me. After I had done, born, raised, school, children, career, that you see normally, the words, and then came to me. And it was in that moment I realized that there was something more that I was supposed to do with my life. My life was not going to end, and actually it was this weekend here in the United States, Labor Day weekend in 2007, that this experience happened. So this is we're recording this the day after Labor Day here in the States, and realizing that, oh my God, there was something more. I had no idea what that was going to be. I had nothing occurred to me, but I knew something else was going to happen. And that was the moment that I started to climb out of that hole, back out of the abyss of addiction. And it was very slow and very intentional and very purposeful, that every decision I made going forward was about getting better and about recovery and about finding my life again. And it has paid off in so many ways. Our friendship here is just one of the many ways it has paid off. I would never have met people like you or anyone else in SASH if I hadn't made that decision to take one step. And that's why I like the 12 steps. It's not just, yes, there's 12 parts. They are steps, one after very slow, intentional, difficult, worthy of our time and our lives steps. They are the guidepost for my life today. So and my recovery journey then took me to becoming a certified recovery coach, and I work with men. I am a sponsor. I am I'm going to be a grandfather come in January. I'm a better spouse. I'm a better person. I have responsibility for caregiving for my father. Since my mom passed, my dad's 92. And I love doing that and sitting with him. That's my recovery journey. Because in the past, that time, any time I would have spent outside of my addiction would have led me to resentment, because I wanted to be back acting out. I didn't want to go to a meeting. I didn't want to spend time with people. I didn't want to pick up the phone, or write that memo or do that project. They were taking me away from over here, and I really wanted to be over there. That resentment is now gone, because I love, again, all areas of my life. I just quickly, my son and his wife just moved into a new house last week, and I spent 10 days painting the inside of the house, which I haven't done since I was much younger. I had absolutely no resentment of doing it, because it was an act of love. And this was the vow I took to my son, that I will be there. I love you so much that I will be there for you. And so I spent 10, 12 hours a day for 10 days painting a 4-bedroom house, which was exhausting. But I never had an inkling of resentment. That's all due to recovery.
I'm going to say, Steve, that
a very short question.
No, it's it's important. I'm thrilled you've gone into that much detail, because how we get into recovery is probably one of the most profound moments of our life. How we stay in recovery is obviously another one. Mm-hmm. That, to me, the fact you can spend 12 hours painting a house is proof of recovery, because I'd rather watch paint dry. I can't stand painting. So I'm sensing it wasn't your favorite hobby a few years ago. But look, I joke, but the most profound and important messages that you've delivered are what got you away from the suicide table. And as you talk about, you said if it wasn't for recovery, I'd be 6 feet under. I herald that. I echo that. I'm also in recovery from sex addiction. I am one of the lucky ones. I've never been arrested. Your honesty with your story is inspiring to me. It shows me it doesn't matter how low someone goes, they can come back if they choose to. And happiness is a choice. I don't care what anyone says. It is a choice. And I didn't make that choice for decades. And I have tried to kill myself twice. Yeah. Once in front of a truck and once on a cliff. There are some famous cliffs on the south coast of England, which is where people go to die. And I went there and I sat there and I was talked off the ledge by a chaplain and a policeman. Yeah. And so likewise, and that since then, that was the point that I reached. You had to go to prison. I had to get to that cliff edge and sit there and look at the sea. And it was a welcoming sight. It wasn't frightening, it was welcoming, because I thought this is going to finally take away the pain of how much I hate, what I've done, but even more so, me. It was self-hatred that got me there, even more than what I'd done to other people, because at that stage, I hadn't actually started to face the true consequences of what I'd done, how I'd hurt people, how I'd betrayed girlfriend after girlfriend and destroyed relationship after relationship for over 30 years. So coming into recovery for me, which was triggered, by the way, by an amazingly brave lady on the morning of Monday, the 14th of June, 2004. I have an uncanny memory for the dates that have changed my life. And this very brave lady changed my life because she busted me. And she looked me in the eye and said, Mark, I have to ask you, she knew I'd gone to a party. And clearly she had a hunch as to what kind of a party it was. And she finally looked me in the eye that morning and said, did you have sex with anybody else this weekend? I guess, obviously, she was hoping the answer would be no. But when she finally asked me face to face, straight into my eyes, I couldn't lie. And that answer changed my life. My honesty, finally, changed my life. And 3 weeks later, I tried to kill myself. I pulled out in front of a truck. Mm-hmm. And the very next day, the 8th of July, 2004, I checked into my first residential rehab. And people say, why did you do that? Why did you go voluntarily? And I say to them, because I had reached a point where the pain of screwing around outweighed the curiosity, the pain of getting curious to find out why I was doing it. Mm-hmm. And the sad thing about recovery, bearing in mind I came to recovery at a time when the word trauma still wasn't really very big on most psychotherapists' lips. It was very much the abstinence model. And abstinence for drug addiction is quite well defined. You have to stop it because no human being on earth needs heroin or cocaine or crystal meth, and neither does any human being need alcohol. So recovery from one perspective is clearly defined for what we call the chemical addictions. For the behavioral addictions, which includes sex, it includes eating, it includes work, it includes exercise, it includes gambling. With the exception perhaps of gambling, every single behavioral addiction that I can think of, you need to do in some form to live. Yeah. Anorexics have to eat or they die. Sex addicts have to have sex to procreate and have a family. So how do you then define recovery if you have to do what you've been doing unhealthily and suddenly hope to be able to do it healthily? Right. So that's been a big part of my challenge. And the transition has taken me 17 years. Yeah. And here I am, age 54. 17 years ago, 2004 was my epiphany. And I'm still learning what that means. So you talk about a journey earlier. I herald that. It is a journey. It's a lifelong journey for me. People might think they've got it licked. I thought at times in the last 17 years, I've got it licked. And I got complacent. And I was going to SAA, Sex Addicts Anonymous meetings, in the sort of early teens, 2011, 12, 13. And I was sitting there and I was singing the Serenity Prayer like a good little boy. And I was talking the talk. I was not walking the walk. And I was still doing things behind girlfriends' backs. I was still lying to my therapist by omission of the truth because I didn't want to give it up. It was, as you said, it was so strong in me. I needed some link to a very unhappy past because I'd become so used to pain. Right. That I didn't want to trust that this thing called happiness would actually deliver what it promised.
Yes.
And so I retreated into pain because that's what I knew best. And of course, the consequences of that spoke for themselves.
Yeah.
So that's getting into recovery, I think, is a huge part of it. And I'd say thank you for your in-depth answer. My own thoughts on the matter. Hopefully people will listen to this and show it to people that might need to realize the importance of taking that first step. You talk of the 12 steps. We both know them pretty well. The first step is simply admitting you have a problem. That's basically what it says.
Yeah.
And that's one of the hardest steps. But until you take it, you are not going to start to find that actually happiness does work.
Right.
If you put in the time.
Yeah. You use the word honesty when you were discovered, you know, by the woman who was part of your life at that point in time. And for me, that's what the many of the steps, but the first step is where you start to practice truly rigorous honesty. You look back at your life. You look at that mirror in front of you and go, this is what has happened. And so in my work with the men that I work with, we cut out all the adjectives. It's, I am a sex addict. I masturbated last night. I went to a massage parlor on Tuesday and Thursday, or whatever they're saying. You know, I met with my mistress, my girlfriend. I lied to my family about where I was. Take out it was only once a week, or it was only for an hour, you know, or it was only to whatever your image of choice is.
Yeah.
It's just, this is the rigorous honesty that we have to have about ourselves and where we have been. Mm-hmm. And I love when you talk about that moment of discovery that you could not lie. I'll tell you, one of the things that they never tell you about recovery, at least in my recovery, is I've gotten to the point that I cannot lie. I physically cannot lie to get the words out. Now, that doesn't mean I just spill everything. I'm very careful with people. And so, as an example, telling you my story, there's parts that I didn't share, but you know the major themes of what happened. I have reached my lifelong limit of lying. You know, there's a scene in a movie that I won't mention because it can be triggering for people, but there's a scene where this person is given the opportunity to lie. If he tells one more lie, he will escape all the consequences of his actions. And he sits there, he's recovering, he's an alcoholic and trying to get into recovery, and has tried and failed and tried and failed. He sits there and cannot tell one more lie. And now he ends up going to prison because he told the truth. But he could not, he said, I've reached my lifelong limit. And then he said, then it shoots to him in prison in a 12-step meeting. He said he's never felt freer in his life than he did when he was in prison. Wow. For me, that's me. Mm-hmm. You know, that I find it difficult, if not impossible, to lie to people. Mm. Now, I'm kind to folks. I don't want to hurt anybody, but I can't do it anymore. I had lied so many years to so many people. Mm. It's not happening.
I think I know the movie which you speak, and I don't think it's a bad thing. I know of many treatment centers that use this film in a treatment center. I don't think it's a bad thing to share the title because it is a highly inspirational film. So if you're happy, I'm happy.
The movie is Flight with Denzel Washington.
Absolutely. That's right, yeah.
It's an amazing film.
It is, and I've seen it. And when that end scene is that you feel, even watching the film, you feel a liberation as you finally see him free, even though he's now in prison. Yeah, and it's a powerful movie. Yeah, so anyone that's to get an understanding of the power of lying versus the power of telling the truth, watch that film, Flight. As you said,
all these people around him that were willing to enable his lies.
Yes, good point.
To break out of that.
Yeah. Well, look, that leads me to an interesting part of our discussion today. You've just said he had to break out of that circle of friends. let's now move on to, okay, you're in recovery. Let's talk about a little bit about the journey of recovery, because we have to make changes to be in recovery, to want to change. So what are some of the things along your journey that have impacted your life where you've recognized you've had to make changes? And what tools of recovery have you used to help you make those changes?
I have a whole toolbox, so to speak, that I use regularly.
I have a hammer and a chisel, at least.
I have a garage full of those too. I'm a carpenter, in my free time, building all kinds of things. My tools, this is what I developed when I was in prison, that I was aware that there were things that I needed. I needed to be able to connect to other people. I needed to be able to connect to myself. I needed to be able to connect to my higher power. I needed to find serenity. I needed to find honesty. And I realized I had all those needs. And I also had a series of making columns and now rows of things that I would do day to day. And when you're in a prison, there's not a lot you can do. You really can't go for a walk outside or go for a run. They really object to long distance running outside the wires. They really want you to keep inside the little spaces. But there were still a lot of things I could do. I could make a cup of tea. I could read. I could write a letter. I could read an old letter. I could pray. I could meditate. I could clean up my space. I could do my laundry. So if I needed to connect to my higher power, there was meditation. There was prayer. If I needed to connect to other people, I could read. I could go out and get out of my little space and go sit and talk to people about just what was going on with their lives. And sometimes talked about, when people found out that I had a background in psychology, oh my God, I had like clients coming out of the woodwork, who my only charge was a cup of coffee, so to speak. People say, well, what can I pay? I said, just remember me in your next cup of coffee. But I found all these things that I was doing. If I needed self-care, I haven't shaved today, I apologize. But I would shave, I would do my laundry. And so all these little things that I would do met these set of needs that I had, these positive outcomes for my life. And that's the kind of thing. I journal. I have been journaling almost every day for 14 years and a month, 2 months. Because my date is July 7th, 2007. Yours is July 8th. So something about July maybe. But I have 28 volumes sitting behind me over here on the bookshelf of my journals. And I encourage everyone to journal who's in recovery, because it takes it from up here and really literally down my arm to my fingers to a piece of paper. And I can see my own feelings, my own thoughts there. I don't care if it's complete sentences. I don't care if the spelling is right or wrong. It's only for me. But that probably is my most powerful tool. And I've been doing it now for a long time. And the early ones are incredibly painful to read. The ones I started really on day 2 of my recovery journey. So July 8th, 2007 is when I started writing. And they're just train of thought, just pain and more pain and more pain and more pain. And it's gotten better over time. Clearly, it's gotten better.
Amazing.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about, I've been attending SAA, which, as I said earlier, was Sex Addicts Anonymous for 17 years. And that is, the meetings themselves were my bedrock, dragging my ass to those meetings when in the early days when I really didn't want to go. And then in the latter years, when I couldn't not go, I had to go because I had formed such good friendships with people. And I've got people from the meetings I know who definitely know me better and are far more help in my life than any of my family ever has been.
Yep.
I'm not slagging off my family. They have been supportive in their own way through different times. But when you can pick up the phone to someone who knows you, who knows your history, who you know is not going to judge you, you know is not going to shame you or make you feel bad about the fact you masturbated to porn last night for 6 hours because you had a bad incident in a car park or got triggered or whatever. Just to be able to pick up that phone. And again, it's the first step, isn't it? It's reaching out.
Yeah.
So to me, for my life, and bearing in mind, I do believe that humans are pack animals. You know, we come from caves. We survived through the Neocene and whatever era by huddling together in caves to protect each other. We still want that. It's still in us. You know, people say we're the Marlboro man cruising across the plains with a cigarette and a cowboy hat, looking lonely and powerful. It is lonely.
That's
sex addiction is bloody lonely.
Yeah.
And the irony is, certainly in my experience of addiction, whether it's sex addiction, but the sex addiction in particular, because sex addiction is such a carnal thing, it's so primal. You know, I was so desperate for connection, and yet my acting out took me ever further from it. So it became a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yep.
So connecting with people through the 12-step program has been arguably one, if not the most important tool in my recovery. I think, from my perspective, it's not all about. I don't want to know that I can only survive if I have that connection to other people. There's a lot of work I believe we have to do for ourselves. You talk about self-care. It's so important. You know, how we live. It may seem like a silly thing, but if you're living in a shithole, how do you, and you're surrounding yourself with used baked bean cans, dirty clothes, soil, dirty sheets, and whatever. Where's the pride?
Yeah.
Where is that desire to want to be an integral, proud human being that can stand in front of a mirror, let alone in front of another human being, and say, I'm okay. I like myself. I believe in myself.
Right.
So these things have to start with number one.
Yes.
People sometimes say that it's selfish. You know, that lovely expression, how can you love another until you love yourself? It's not selfish, it's essential.
Essential.
Until you actually can look in a mirror and not be ashamed of the person standing before you, you haven't a hope of having a healthy relationship with anybody else. It's got to start with you.
You bring up a really important point, a couple of really important points that first, the mirror. And I mentioned before that first step, and later on the other steps, the fourth step especially, is that mirror. Making amends is another kind of mirror. People are holding up that mirror to you and saying, this is what happened. See, this is what you did back here. I went through, before I realized that I was on the edge and falling into the abyss, I went through a good year before that of being unable to look myself in the mirror. Physically, I could not look at myself. And when I did, I had no idea who that person was, which is why that in my work with other people, and just in going to 12-step meetings, you know, if I see someone who looks good. Now, I have a friend who just came out of rehab and is coming back to meetings now, and he looks great, so much better than I ever did before, but it's the self-care. And, you know, that's the way he's just dressing himself. And that seems like a small thing and a vain thing, but no, it reflects, you know, yourself. And, you know, his beard is trimmed, you know, he just looks, he's got color in his skin again. He looks good. And I will say to him, I say, you look great. I see your recovery in your eyes. That light is back. On the other hand, I will also say to people who look like they're struggling, what's wrong? And I think that's the obligation that we in recovery have, that we can say to someone who looks like they're in pain, who may not be able to reach out, to say, what's going on? It's what I expect people to do for me. That the people who are in my recovery community, I have told people, if you think something is wrong with me, please, for God's sake, tell me. Because you can be my mirror that I don't see it in myself. If you think that, I am just, something's wrong, that I am ignoring people, I'm looking away during a conversation, I'm looking down, I'm isolating, for God's sake, say something to me. Because I need that. Sometimes I can't see it in myself. I need those other people in my community, however you define it. It can be in a 12-step community. It can be your family. It can be your friends. It can be the guy at the tea shop down the street who you've been going every morning, to get your cup, that they can say to you, Mark, are you okay today? And then you have to be honest enough to say, no, I'm not. I practice this actually all the bloody time. That really, and my family jokes that I do this too much, but it's important. If I go into a delicatessen or into a coffee shop, and you get the ubiquitous, "Oh, how you doing?" And most people say, "Oh, I'm fine." I will say, "I'm hungry. I'm tired. I'm looking forward to going home." And the clerk will give me I didn't ask that question, but for me, it's practice.
Right. Love it.
Practice being honest.
Love it.
All the coffee shops in this region knew I was going to be a grandfather before most people did. I wasn't allowed to tell anybody, but I could tell them because they didn't know anybody else.
Beautiful.
And it was like, "How you doing?" "I'm doing great. I'm going to be whatever." It's like, for me, that was all practice and being rigorously honest.
I love it, Steve. When someone asks me, "How are you?" Today, I never say I'm fine. And if I do, if I ever said that to you, I'd expect you to hold me up, because I answer the question.
Right.
And if I'm really full of joy, I go, I'm absolutely amazing today. I've got nothing to complain about. Thank you for asking. How are you? Yeah. And then so often they go, "I'm fine." But equally, if I'm not fine, I won't spill my guts to the postman. No. But I will say, "Well, thank you for asking. Yeah, got some interesting things going on at the moment, and it's not the easiest day, but thank you for asking." Yeah, and that's honest. It's authenticity, isn't it?
Right.
And if we can practice it with dignity to the postman or to the coffee shop owner or whatever, then that's where it starts. It starts with the simplest things in life.
It does very much.
That's where integrity is born. Yeah. And then, of course, you can go home to your wife or your partner or your therapist, and you can be even more honest, as honest as as honest as you feel safe to be.
Right. Yeah. I also, I didn't say allow, but people in my life are able now through my recovery to call me out on my bullshit.
Yes.
Before, truly, I would use anger, and when people got too close to me, and say, "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I'm fine." I keep people way out here.
Yeah.
Now, if someone thinks I'm full of BS, they tell me. Yeah. And I go, "Yeah, you're right. I'm just full of shit." All you SASH community people.
That's what you need. We need friends like that. If you want to get honest in recovery, you got to choose your friends wisely. If you choose friends who will continue to facilitate your pain and worse, support your addiction, you are not going to get well. You have to choose friends who will call you out and you will love them for it. And that sounds weird as hell. And I have one particular friend who I went through some difficult times 3 years ago, and he got pretty straight with me. In fact, he was staying in my house last night, and I've known this guy for 37 years. He's a trained psychotherapist. And when I fell off the rails, I went to see him and confess all, because a lot came out at this particular juncture. Right. And he looked me in the eye, he said, "Mark, here's the interesting thing. I believed you, i.e. I believed your bullshit, because you believed it." Mm. And it was one of the most helpful things a friend who happens to be a trained psychotherapist has ever said to me. I believed my crap so much that I was able to convince even a trained psychotherapist that actually I was fine, and I was able to dress over the cracks. Yeah. And therefore, when I had that particular fall from grace, it was a tough one.
Sure.
And that led.
Not to harp too much on honesty, but we spent our lifetimes lying to ourselves and lying to other people.
Yeah.
We have to relearn how to tell the truth, how to be honest with ourselves, how to be honest with other people, how to say, and honest with myself means, I'm a little, not writing this down, but, I'm a little overwhelmed with work.
Yeah.
Just tell myself, I'm a little overwhelmed. I got some things going on. Actually, we are traveling this upcoming weekend, so I only have till Thursday afternoon. Okay, I got to face that.
Yeah.
That's being honest with me. I want to go back, if you don't mind, for a minute. You talked about the difference between sexual addiction, pornography addiction, our side of the street, and drugs and alcohol, and the behavioral addictions. And I think there is an important distinguished piece in understanding those two. For me in my work, and me personally, that you have to get behind, probably for both, I take this back, what's behind the sexual addiction, the pornography addiction, the masturbation addiction, the anorexia, sexual anorexia, which is a big issue here in the States, and maybe every place else, I just don't know. My bottom lines are not behavioral. They started that way. My bottom lines are emotional.
So, Steve, can you just explain to the audience, just in case, when you say what is it? What is the bottom line? Just clear that one.
The bottom line is the behaviors that you will not, or the things you will not act on. So I will no longer look at pornography is a typical bottom line. That is just dangerous for me. I won't do it. I won't, have affairs outside of marriage. I won't masturbate. I won't, all these behaviors that people have. And for me, yes, those are important. But what I tell the people that I work with, if that's, what you focus on, you're going to be holding on by your fingertips for a long time. What you have to do is understand what leads you to that. Why are you using that as an escape from whatever you're escaping from? And Beautiful. For me, what I used to escape from was feelings.
Right.
Being overwhelmed, being resentful. I would try to escape from those, and then I'd use the behaviors as the way. If I can get behind my feelings. So my emotional bottom lines, the things that get me into trouble are fear, anger, resentment. FAR, FAR. Fear, anger, resentment. And my little cute thing is I remember how far I've come from back then. But if I see resentment coming toward me, I know I got to figure out what is behind that. If I see anger coming at me, I just can't let it run roughshod over me. I have to get away from it and figure out what led me to be angry, what led me to be anxious, what led me to be, resentful or fearful. Because if I don't, I'm going to be acting out in my addiction. I'm going to be looking at porn or masturbating or whatever else, dark spots in the world that I will return to.
Steve, I love that. Thank you for making that so clear. I think that for our audience, for anyone wanting to understand any recovery journey, let alone whether it's sex addiction, anorexia, whatever, that is what I hear you talking to, which is right, what I drill strongly into anyone that turns to me for help, is that addiction is not the problem. Addiction is a symptom of a problem. And you've just nailed it by saying the actual problem is emotional.
Right.
The physical acting out, whether you're seeing prostitutes, gambling, drinking a bottle of vodka, that's a manifestation. That's your way of releasing the tension and trying to hide the emotional pain.
Yeah.
But that's not the core problem.
Right.
So thank you for making that. That's a really beautiful point to make so clear.
Yeah.
One
of the things I hear the men I work with saying is, I need sex.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I don't buy that.
Mm.
I believe what we really need is intimacy.
I love it. Totally agree. And intimacy with who, Steve? Intimacy with who first?
Intimacy with ourselves, of course.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And that's honesty. And then you can see there's a theme here.
Yes.
Yeah, very much so. But I need to have that intimate, close connection to other people. And I can get that at a 12-step meeting. I can get that in my coffee shop. I can get that with a friend. I can get that in my place of worship. Wherever there's a community that I feel that connection to. What I need is intimacy first. If sex happens to come out of, a relationship, that's great. That's nice. Mm. But we need to connect to other people, and we need to connect to ourselves. We need to have an intimate relationship right here. And this is you and I are having an intimate conversation right now. We're sharing about our history and our stories. And you and I have talked about these before, but I'm always learning something new about you. And that's an intimate sharing. And I love that.
Likewise. Steve, I often quote Desmond Tutu, who says, we have to stop just pulling people out of the river. We have to go upstream and figure out why they're falling in the first place. Mm. And I think that quote pretty much sums up addiction in one sentence.
Yeah.
Steve, I got a couple more questions because we've had an amazing amount of time together already. Time goes so quickly when you're being intimate and healthy, and I love conversations with you. But just a couple to round this off. Do you think that a lot is said and spoken of in the whole recovery community about the 12 steps? And I'm not ever going to be the one to say they haven't helped. They've saved millions of lives since Alcoholics Anonymous was started by Bill Wilson in 1935. But a lot has changed since 1935. Psychology, brain scans, neuroscans, neuropsychology, MRI, all the modern technology that can be brought to bear on trying to get behind the addiction rather than just stopping it, which was the abstinence model, and figuring out the why. So I ask you, do you think the 12 steps on their own are enough?
Oh my. I had the benefit in recovery of getting on some medication for depression and anxiety that helped bring me up to a level I could function again. I had the benefit of seeing a psychologist, of being in group therapy, of going to 12-step meetings, of going to couples therapy. You name the modality, couples 12 steps, I was all over it. Because I did not want to go back. I wanted to do everything I could to get better. I think that a lot of the science does explain. There's a wonderful book by Gerald May, M-A-Y, called Addiction and Grace, which I adore that book because it explains in a common language about the neuroscience of addiction.
Yeah.
And when I read that, yes, I'm interested in the neuroscience and the synapses, but it gave me hope.
Yeah, beautiful.
Because his message was that we can heal. Our brain can heal from the trauma, the scars of addiction. And I do believe addiction of any kind, but I think sexual addiction is a trauma to us. In a moral trauma, a psychological trauma, a cognitive trauma, a physical trauma. And the brain has a way to heal. And so when I read that, it was a message of hope, which is what the 12 steps are about. We talk about experience, strength, and hope. And this was the hope piece that I wanted. For me, the theme, one of the eye-opening experiences were the themes that you see in the 12 steps actually date back well before Dr. Bob. That, I'm a religious person. And so one of the things that I read in my recovery was St. Ignatius and the spiritual exercises. And when I read it, I thought, oh my goodness, this is the 12 steps.
Yeah.
This is self-reflection, which is the first couple steps. It's doing a moral inventory I skip the ones to the higher power, which I can go back and do. They realize, I can't do this by myself. I need some help. Okay, that's 2 and 3. I got to give it up to a therapist, a community, God, whatever you want to say. I've tried to stop this. It ain't happening on my own. Okay, I know I'm off the rails. I need help. Okay, that's 2nd and 3rd. And then you get to the point of a moral inventory, which is, for me, when I work with people, is what kind of person do I want to be? What do I want my core to be, my core values to be? And when did I go this way? And when did I go that way? You can say which one is good or bad. When did I, get off the rails of that moral core? And when was I a good person and stay on that moral core? And then you try to live by those values. And then you work on making amends to people. You do in Catholic faith, it's a confession, or in other faiths, it's a confession. Yom Kippur, it's atoning for our sins. That I have to make up. I have to, again, it's a verb. It's amending. I'm amending my life. I'm not just making amends. I'm not just saying, I'm sorry for all the bad things I did to you. It's, I want to hear what you said. I want to hear what you say, and I want to amend my life going forward.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And so, yes, I believe it just systematizes what we need to do. We need to understand ourselves, how we got here. We can't do it on our own. This is the person that I want to be. This is the person that I wasn't. I need to, find a way to change my life for the rest of my life. I love the question guys will often give me in 12 steps. How long do I have to do this? How long do I have to go to meetings? The rest of your life is my answer. You need to be changing the rest of your life. And that's the journey.
Well, I've heard people say that if you want to think of it as a life sentence, that's one thing. Or you can think of it as being sentenced to life, to enjoy life, to have it.
Yes.
It's not a life sentence.
No.
If you see it that way, you're going to fail.
Right. No,
Steve, I'm just going to say thank you. I hear so much in your answer to that question. It's not a loaded question, but it certainly was intentful to help people understand that, yes, the 12 steps are an amazing foundation. They're a fantastic framework. But I know that I would not have got to the bottom of the why I started to act out, the why I became this very dysfunctional, defended, defiant person. I would not have got the answers to any of that why if I hadn't sought help from professionals. If I hadn't, I found my way to the Amazon jungle for 3 weeks back in 2017 because I still had a burning desire to get to a truth which I had a hunch lay inside me. And by working with shaman in the Amazon, I mean, this is pretty wacky and out there, some people might think, and I'm very lucky I could afford to do this. Not everyone can. And not everyone, you don't need to fly the Amazon, but I got my answer from working with shaman in the Amazon, because I finally came to the realization and the truth that I was very badly physically abused by the nanny I was handed to from birth, from age 0. And that damage, that loathing of women, my ability to be so complacent, to use women and then spit them out of one relationship after another, came from the fact that I carried a deep fear of women because of what that nanny did to me. And it took me almost half a century to get that truth. And no therapist I'd ever worked with prior to flying to the Amazon had even come close to that truth. They'd given me lots of good ideas about the fact, yes, I was sent to a boarding school and that carried its own traumas and nightmares. But the real trauma for me began the day my mother handed me to an abusive nanny. And I have since those days, I've found living witnesses in the form of cousins who have helped me understand. They witnessed this woman abusing me, but were too frightened to say anything. So when you get the truth of the why, you are empowered to choose to do something differently. But until you understand why you're doing something, which the 12 steps don't always give you. Yeah. That's my experience. I'm not saying it's a carte blanche rule, but I feel it's important in this video, in this film we're shooting, whatever you want to call it, to make it clear to people that if you are lucky enough to be able to afford a good therapist to get help beyond just sitting in a group of other hurting people, take the opportunity, grab it with both hands, do it, fine. And if you want to, that leads to my last question, actually. Let's just briefly discuss how people can find the help they might need. And one of them is through our organization, an organization on the board of which you and I both sit. It's called SASH,
right.
the Society for the Advancement of Sexual Health, meaning, and the emphasis is in the clue is in the title, sexual health. It does not say no sex. It does not say sex is bad. Okay, let's get that one out in public too, because a lot of people seem to think it is. Steve, some closing thoughts from you. We've talked about a lot, and you've been so open and so kind and gracious with your time and your story and your integrity. Anything you'd like to add to what we've been talking about to sort of close up this very intimate conversation?
I think you struck on something that's very important for me in recovery. Is I had no idea when I entered this 14 years ago in a few months that you and I would be sitting here having this conversation. I had no idea that there'd be communities out there that would understand who I was and what I had been through and the lies I had told myself and were committed to helping me get better. I had no idea there's an organization like SASH. And I still remember the day that I got the phone call saying, will you be on the board? And I had to look around going, you mean, and it was a phone call, you mean me? I'm just a recovering guy. And it was just wonderful to be part of an organization like we have that is committed to this. You know, my interest in SASH is to be an organization that advocates for people who are in recovery. And that comes through therapists, that comes through coaches, that comes through educators. We are committed to advocating for those themes. And in a time where it's very easy to get divided in our country, you know, in all kinds of ways in terms of gender and gender identity and gender orientation, let alone everything else that's going on around the world, to have an organization that is opening to other people and is not just, well, we're only this, we're only that, you know, that you got this about, you know, your sexual health or your questions about intimacy or your life, come on board. You know, we are here, and we've got such a variety of people in the organization that just, it's heartwarming. It's, you know, I find the variety of ways people approach this to be so enlightening. We're not committed to this, like we talk about the 12 steps, as you pointed out. So it's the 12 steps or nothing. Hardly at all. You know, it's EMDR, it's the 12 steps, it's psychotherapy, it's retreats, you know, it's going to the Amazon. If that's the place that you needed to go to find that little nugget of your recovery, go for it. You know, the comment I make to people is, I will go to any distances to make sure that I never become an addict again. I will go as far as I need to go and get whatever help I need to get and offer all the help that I can offer people to make sure that other people and myself don't end up dead. I have known too many people who have taken their own lives because of this addiction, who are still suffering. You know, I am here to help those people because I have been there. I know what it's like to plan your own death, to look over that. You did a physical cliff. You know, I was thinking other ways, but to be standing on that abyss going, I can't go forward. And I've had calls in the middle of the night that I'll go and meet someone, you know, at a diner just because I know they're on that edge. It feels like my life is so much better when I do that. So,
Steve, thank you so much. A few closing thoughts. This for so many years, people have demonized sex. It goes back hundreds, maybe thousands of years. There's always someone out there that thinks it's bad or tries to say this is bad, that is bad. It's so many things are in the eye of the beholder. Mm-hmm. There are definitely things that we can learn to do to mask pain. And pain comes, I so firmly now believe, from childhood. We learn as children from our caregivers. And if those caregivers are not doing such a good job, we learn how to protect ourselves. And if one of those protective mechanisms happens to be secrecy, which it very often is where most addictions start, then that's where we go. And we build our own walls, we build our own world, and we inhabit that world. And unfortunately, we then get stuck in that world in the form of addiction. Yeah. I don't care whether there are people, and I know that there are people out there that will swear blind and even get angry and try and convince you there's no such thing as sex addiction. You can't be addicted to sex. I don't care. I just know that I've almost committed suicide twice. Yep. Because I have used sex to bury acute trauma, physical, emotional, neglect, and brutal trauma that I experienced between the age of 0 and 10. I know how I have used sex. So you call it what you want. You can call it problematic sexual behavior, compulsive sexual behavior, overactive penis syndrome. I don't care. Call it what you want. I want this community to come together and recognize that if you are doing anything compulsively, especially something of a sexual and therefore sometimes dangerous nature, you have to help someone understand why they're doing it and help them stop doing it and learn to do sex, if we're talking about sex, in a healthy way. So let's stop fighting about pronouns, synonyms, titles, and let's continue to help people as a community of people who want to see people grow and heal and enjoy the life they deserved from the day they were born, but a life that was stolen from them and from which they are now recovering themselves, yourself, me.
Yeah. We're all looking for meaning. And unfortunately, we look in the wrong places at times.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And this is about any kind of recovery. It's finding those right places, finding that meaning in your life again.
Beautiful.
And that can happen at any age. Doesn't matter.
No. You just got to want it. Just got to want it.
Right. Want it. Or believe it's out there, to have that hope. There's something more, which is those two words, and then, that I heard.
Well, Steve, I know you bring hope to every person. You've brought me hope. You've been an immense friend to me, and it has been so special having this conversation with you today. So thank you so much for your time, your dignity, your honesty, and your friendship.
My only regret is we don't live closer.
I know. Well, who knows? The world's a changing place. But for now, from across the pond in England, I say a huge thank you, wish you a massive hug, and say see you when I can, because I'm probably sadly not going to be making it to the conference because I'm not allowed into your country. But for now, much love, and we'll speak soon, and we'll see each other as soon as we can.
You know it, my friend. God bless you.
God bless. Thank you, Steve.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.